further side from me, there is Mary Jane Ciccarello with the Utah State Courts. Mary Jane is the director of the Self-Help Center at the Utah State Courts. Before joining the courts in 2007, she was an elder law attorney in private practice. She also served previously as the legal services developer for the Utah Division of Aging and Adult Services, a staff attorney with the Legal Aid Society of Salt Lake and Utah Legal Services, and the Dean of Students at the University of Utah S.J. Quinney College of Law, where she now teaches elder law and poverty law as an adjunct professor. Mary Jane is also a co-director of the Borchardt Foundation Center on Law and Aging. Immediately next to Mary Jane in the middle is Nan Mindenhall. Nan has over 24 years of experience working for Adult Protective Services. Nan has been the director of Adult Protective Services since 2011. Prior to her appointment, she was the regional director over Salt Lake, Tuala, Summit, and Wasatch counties, where provided leadership and direction for the region in the development and implementation of program standards, region goals, and the Adult Protective Services programs. Nan provides leadership and direction in the state's community education efforts by focusing state training towards critical community entities. Nan represents APS on a variety of community and allied agency committees, councils, and task forces. Sergeant Michelle Ross, immediately next to me, Michelle Ross is currently a sergeant assistant to the Salt Lake City Police Department's Outreach Emergency Management Unit. She developed and implemented the Salt Lake City Homeless Outreach Service Team Program, HOST, and recently received a grant award from the U.S. Department of Justice Community-Oriented Policing. Sergeant Ross is the project coordinator for the Office on Violence Against Women and National Clearinghouse on Abuse in Later Life grant. Sergeant Ross has been with the Salt Lake City Police Department for 21 years. So, now they will say several words about the work they do and the project they're currently working on. So why don't we start with Mary Jane Ciccarello.
Okay, well, thank you, and thank you all for being here this evening. That was quite a powerful film. I hadn't seen it yet either. As you heard the judge in the film, the court's role in these kinds of issues tends to be when people come to the court to have an appointment of a guardian or conservator over an adult who is determined to be incapacitated. What we're trying to do now in the courts, and have been trying to do over time, but there's a more aggressive effort perhaps at this point, is to make sure that the proceeding to appoint a guardian or conservator is handled properly, follows all the laws and all the protections for all the parties involved, and that once the appointment is made, that the court continues to have some ability to monitor what's going on in that protected person's life and what the guardians and conservators are doing. Part of that effort is the development of this program, the Court Visitor Program, headed by Carolina and Michelle, who's somewhere here in the audience. There she is up there. And that is an effort to recruit and train volunteers who will then be assigned by the court to, in various ways, visit people who are about to undergo a guardianship or conservatorship, and also, once that happens, to go out and make sure that the guardians and conservators are filing the reports that they are obligated to do. None of this is meant to burden family members. It is, however, meant to make sure that the people who need protection are getting the proper protection. So that's a big effort, to make sure that the procedures are followed both before and after a guardianship or conservatorship, and that we have the ability to reach out with the court visitors to make sure people are all right, and that the courts have an ability to see what's going on. As you heard from all of these people, all government agencies and nonprofit agencies face very dire financial situations these days, and so it's wonderful to be able to have a volunteer program to help with these efforts. The courts internally are also trying very hard to educate our clerks, our staff, and our judges so that all of us know what the laws are, what the procedures are, what the best practices are. So I think those are the efforts, and we are trying as well to educate people who need to know about these things, and so some public outreach and education like tonight. I think those are the main points from the court's point of view.
All right. You may be aware, and you may not, but Adult Protective Services is a state agency that is mandated by state law that we are the responsible agency to investigate abuse, neglect, and exploitation allegations involving a vulnerable adult or an elder adult. Here in the state of Utah, vulnerability, someone has to be over the age of 18 or has a mental or physical impairment that affects their ability to maybe make sound, decisions, physically take care of themselves, protect themselves. Individuals over the age of 65 is classified as an elder. They do not need a mental or physical impairment. They are a protected class here in the state of Utah, which is unique because not very many other states have that type of statute. Usually you have to have a vulnerability. The state of Nevada, you may have to be 70 years old and have a physical condition that impairs your ability. But here in the state of Utah, you just have to be over the age of 65 in order for APS to get involved, or you're 18 and have a mental or physical impairment that substantially impairs. One of the big things that APS is currently doing is educating individuals that there is an agency that investigates elder crimes and crimes against the vulnerable adults. Many people do not know that there's an agency that they could report to. Outside in the foyer, there's a flyer that we placed out there. There's some warning signs on there, but the most important part is on the bottom of it. It gives the phone numbers that you can contact APS and make a referral. You can either do it by the telephone or you can do it by e-referral. Most individuals, if they find that if they're near a computer every day, they can go to our website and make a referral on the link that says Adult Protect. You want to make a referral. State law, what requirements are there in order for me to make a referral? As long as you suspect someone is being abused, neglected, or reported, we're a mandatory reporting state. So as long as you have reason to believe suspect that someone's being abused, you legally need to report that. Failure to report is a Class B misdemeanor. And that sometimes occurs and someone's charged with that as if they knew someone is being abused and they failed to report it, and that victim suffered serious harm, and it could have been stopped if someone called it. So it's important that you report it. You do not need to have every detail, as long as you explain to us that this is the person that, and we need an address. We can't send an individual out door to door knocking and say, does an elderly person live here? Are you being exploited? So we need to have an address for the safety of my employees also. We don't know what's going on. We're knocking on doors of meth houses. These people can get very violent. And so we need to know where we're going into. But if you have the person's name, please give us the name, their address, and if you have a phone number, that's really nice to have so we can sometimes call them. If we cannot physically get in, we can call them and see if they're okay. And then what you need is to let us know what your concern is. And that way we can write it up, and our investigator can do some background checking to see if we've had prior cases on this individual. What to expect when you submit a referral. Our investigators have 3 days to start a case. They have up to 5 business days to get out and see the victim. Usually our average in getting out to see a victim is usually 3.5 days, is what we're seeing. Some remote areas, I have workers that have to travel 6 to 7 hours in a car to get out to see an individual. So sometimes it does take longer. Emergency situations, we have 24 hours. We are not staffed like child welfare where they have 24/7 on call. Due to budgetary cuts, we are open from 8 to 5. No after-hour calls nor weekend calls. So if after hours or on weekends, if there's an emergency involving a senior, please call 911. Law enforcement will respond. EMTs will respond. They will let us know when they get the next business day that, hey, I think APS needs to be involved in this particular case. If you're the referent on the case, be expected a phone call from my investigator. They need to call you back to get additional information. So it's not real vital that you give the intake worker every ounce of information that you have, because the investigator is going to call you back. And that's when you can collaborate and give them more information. We have to see the victim. We have situations where we've had to meet victims in a park because they're afraid the perpetrator would see us. Or we would, we interview people through a window because of their fear of their safety. So there's various ways that we do, but we have to get out and see the victim. We do assessments. And we do assessments on capacity, because the ability to make informed choices is very vital. As mentioned in the film with the judge, someone has the right to make poor choices, even with finances. It's tough to walk away, but as long as we can educate them, hopefully at one time someone in their community can help them, educate them a little farther. But the ability to make informed choices is very, very important. With the capacity, we share that with law enforcement also, especially if there's a crime. That undue influence, we assess that. We have 45 days to investigate, and we can go longer if we have to. Some of our statistics show in our cases over the every year we analyze our records, and the primary age of a victim is a female over the age of 85. Perpetrators are family members, usually a son in the range of 50, but doesn't mean just family members are the abusers. Financial crimes is our fastest growing allegation. It grew 27% in 1 year. I've seen it in every class of an individual. It happens to anyone. It can happen to your neighbor. It's happened to a family member that I know. I bet everyone in this room may know someone that's been affected by financial exploitation. So I think as we look into this with the baby boomers, we need to everyone take a proactive approach with this, because we did a study with our cases, seniors in the state of Utah each week is losing over $1 million. Eventually it's going to catch up to the taxpayers, because what happens is they lose all their money, they can't afford the rent, they end up going to a nursing home, get on Medicaid, and now the taxpayers are paying their stay, and it's not their fault. It's because they fell victims to a crime.
Thanks, Nat. So my job in this group is Salt Lake City was awarded a grant from the Office of Violence Against Women due to a need in the community for better recognition, more training. As you can see in the film, there's a lot of individuals who are involved in these cases that are responsible for prosecuting, for following up to make sure that victims are heard and their families get justice. And we need to do a better job. So we received a grant, and what's been nice is we've been able to meet with all the stakeholders, the service providers, APS, aging services. We just barely found, Carolina actually just found us, so we're also going to be including the courts. But we have a large group, and basically it's an opportunity to train the individuals who are responsible to bring justice for this crime. So we're going to be training law enforcement, we're going to be training victim services, we're going to be training judges and prosecutors. And with that better training, we're going to be able to respond to these situations and take those steps that are necessary so that, you know, victims aren't falling through the cracks, so that you don't have a detective telling you that there's insufficient evidence. We don't want people getting lost in the system because our victims are difficult, because they're in difficult situations and they're, you know, they don't have the capacity, or you know, as you saw in the film, you know, they're my friend. I don't want anything bad to happen, but they're stealing from me. It leaves law enforcement in a difficult situation. It leaves prosecutors in a difficult situation. So as we receive the better training, we're able to press forward with these cases. What we're also doing is we're outlining a better plan, which involves all of the agencies in a collaborative effort to meet the needs of the victims, so that when we have those cases, 24/7, we have an advocate who we can call right on the phone, and if that victim needs to be removed from that property because they're in a dangerous, unsafe, unstable situation, we have a place to take them. We are a little behind right now because 20 years ago when I got hired, Child Protective Services was in the same boat. They didn't have a place to take children who needed to be removed from homes. So there was a system that was put in place to take care of that situation and to get those kids out of those situations. Well, now we're seeing the same thing, but we're seeing it in our vulnerable adult and elder cases. So we're working with a lot of different agencies to put that system in place. We want to be able to do more to get that one-stop shop, get that person the services they need so they don't have to go from one place to another. You know, we're working on educating our public, educating our elders, going to the places where we see our victims or potential victims, or where the elders go, and educating them on what they should be made aware of. You know, there's, you know, a whole, well, three-pronged approach on how we're going to do that and how we're going to train our prosecutors and our judges, because this is a serious problem. And as you've seen in the movie and as Nan pointed out, you know, we have the baby boomers who are coming up, and we want to make sure that we take care of our victims and their families when they need it.
Thank you, and we will take any questions that you might have. And I will ask the whoever responds the question to repeat it, please.
Thank you.
Carolina, are you going to answer? Okay. Nan will
We'll
take care of us.
We'll go ahead with.
So in the scenario you gave, what happens if the elder is undocumented and may be ineligible for public services?
So the question was, what happens if the elder is undocumented? Salt Lake City Police Department, a victim is a victim. It does not matter if you're here, legal or illegal. That is not a status that we check. We are here to service any of the victims who call, who need help. So that is not something that we look into. You know, most of the services don't require that you be a legal resident in order to receive services. In Salt Lake City, we definitely will handle that.
What about a nursing home?
It is difficult. We will work, same thing, it doesn't matter who the victim is, it's a victim, and we'll take care of it. We'll work closely with the nursing homes. Some nursing homes have done a fabulous job trying to take care of that person to make sure that they can stay there. There's a lot of legwork. Is it scripted on what we can do and how we can do it? But to my knowledge, it can get done. It's just very tedious, and a lot of paperwork and a lot of paper trails that you have to track back and try to get some stuff done for them. It's not impossible, is basically, I think, what I'm trying to say.
And could I just add, Nan, and correct me if I'm incorrect, and I see some people in the audience who might know better than I, now that I can see people with the lights. The long-term care ombudsman services, primarily in facilities, and adult protective services, and any of the area agency on aging services, are all in part regulated by federal law, the Older Americans Act, which does not require any documentation of legal residency. So I think it's, as we've heard, these agencies are providing services and are not screening on that level.
But, you know, once again, it is difficult to get them the Medicaid eligible, but
that's another issue.
Yeah, it's another issue, but there's some back ways that we can do it and some hardships and stuff. But very rarely have we seen a situation like that to where they've had to be in a nursing facility. Usually it's outside, they're in their own apartment, and we've gotten involved in those type of situations. Yes.
I'm having trouble reconciling things you're saying about investigating to bring justice to the situation with an experience of my own, wherein he was a former football player to the coach relationship, came back into his life, became good friends, and persuaded him to change his will and his trust. I was told by an attorney that if I had to prove that at the moment he signed that, he had to be incompetent. At that very moment. It didn't matter how he was functioning during his life, but it was the moment he signed. I went to the law library and read everything that I could find that the librarians could refer me to, and I was appalled that there seemed to be nothing in Utah in the law to protect us when we get to that situation. So what is it that you have behind you that you're investigating that you can prosecute on? You see, I don't understand. Now, it was in 707 when I was doing this reading, but I suspect nothing has changed since because I've followed it in the news. So what is it that you have as a basis to investigate, to report, to prosecute?
I'm not sure I can repeat the entire question for the recording, but I think the issue is what can be done possibly to prosecute or deal with what sounds like possibly an issue of undue influence, which in the film the judge was talking about. And that really, and please chime in, anyone out there who wants to, that really is a very case-by-case analysis. It's very fact-specific. It is not really something that I believe the police or APS could necessarily investigate. That is, who's influencing someone to change a will or other testamentary documents.
Financial abuse and fraud.
It may.
What the film was all about. It's financial worries. My biggest worry is that somebody's going to take advantage of my finances when I'm in that state. More than, and I'm a modest means person, more than running out of money before I run out of life. You know, and I think as we become aware of these things and have it happen to someone we know, it becomes a more serious issue.
Sure.
And from what I could read, there's nothing in the Utah law that protects us from this.
In the APS statute, it identifies who the perpetrator could be. It could be anyone. It could be a person in a business relationship. That could be the exploiter. We've had successes in getting cases prosecuted because it took a collaborative effort from everyone. We had psychologists that were able to go in, and we were able to use their medical documentation that really was detailed to show that when this paperwork was signed, they didn't understand what they were signing due to some diagnosis that they had. and then APS had history that we could use, the prosecutors could use, that, okay, here's a timeline on the decline of the capacity issue. And so we are able to get, and so it takes a collaborative effort, not from just one agency and their evidence that they collect. It's going to take a army, basically, with evidence that we can piece together. And that's what I'm starting to see here, with, especially since the SLEEP grant, is we have a community coming together and says, oh, I can do that. We have financial institutions saying, what can we do to prevent this from happening? We have a very close relationship with the district attorney's office and the city prosecutor's office. They are training my workers. This is what elements of the crime that you need to help us obtain. And so we're going out and interviewing and gathering data or evidence, basically, to help them prosecute cases. It's happening. It wasn't happening 15 years ago when I was an investigator. We had a nasty, nasty case where a daughter stole over $100,000 from mom because she didn't buy her daughter a car when she was 16. So the daughter's saying, you know what, that car's mine. I can buy any car now because I just stole $100,000 from you. I took it to law enforcement. This is a civil issue. That's changed completely now. Salt Lake City Police Department, we can call their financial detectives and say, hey, can we staff a case with you? These are the elements of the case that we have. What else do we do? So it's taken all of us together. Not one agency can put it together and get it prosecuted.
So I'm pretty convinced this person was a predator and is still out there finding other people because he sells financial services and estate planning. So are you saying that I could bring my experience and that information to you to see if we can find other people that this guy has been a predator to? I think of it as being like a pedophile in a daycare center.
If the person is selling like financial plans, Consumer Affairs, Department of Consumer Affairs here in the state of Utah, they are the agency that could look further into those business transactions. We can look if we have to have a victim, but because we can't seek, here's a perpetrator, go try to find the victims. We need to have a victim. But if you have concerns this person is operating outside the realm of his license and committing fraud, the Department of Consumer Affairs is the agency that would be interested in those type of cases.
The Department of Consumer Affairs is the first place to go.
Thank you.
Given the various cases that were in this movie, in this documentary, and given Utah law, do you think that the outcome, the unsatisfactory outcomes that most of them experienced would be different with Utah law? If any of these cases came across your desk, would they be handled any different?
What the question was is what the scenarios that were on the film would we in the state of Utah have success in prosecuting some of these cases? These cases that were shown, we see these cases on a daily basis in the state of Utah. Some of these cases we can prosecute, and there's some that we can. And I can only speak with APS and the cases that we've gotten and had to screen with law enforcement in the district attorney's office, because you have to meet elements of the statute. And sometimes it looks really bad, but it's very difficult. And Mary Jane can speak to that, and Michelle as working for the law enforcement. But we see these cases, some of them just like this, we've hit a roadblock on, and there's nothing, our hands are tied.
Right, I would agree with that. And as I was trying to say before, these are all so very fact-specific. And so as agencies get better trained, staff get better trained, then they know how to identify what's going on, can take it to prosecutors. Prosecutors are a big part of this, and deciding whether there's something to prosecute. Also, possibly, is there a civil cause of action, and having lawyers who handle civil cases and seeing if they think there's something to bring forward. Of course, anytime you have a civil case in court, that means somebody's paying for it, and so that's another issue. If it's happening within a guardianship, conservatorship context, then possibly with better trained court staff and judges, they know what to look at and see what's in front of them. It is an ongoing process. This is new. As Nan said, those of us who have been doing this for decades, this has been a long road, and there's a lot happening right now that I think we can expect better results.
Well, it was peculiar to me that it was the younger couple that were dealing with the fallout from their mother's issues, and there were close-ups saying insufficient evidence. And the daughter-in-law was saying we had everything they could possibly need. And I'm just curious as to whether that would hold up in the Utah court, what they were, and of course you don't have all the details, but.
That would definitely be hard to answer without looking at the entire situation and all of the evidence and interviews and all of that process that goes into place when we're screening for cases. I can tell you, working in the field back in 2004, 2005, a lot of the frustrations that you saw and spoke of were the same things that law enforcement saw. You know, we didn't have the tools to handle the situation, and it was extremely difficult. And I think as time has gone on, I mean, here we are, you know, this many years down the road, and only recently, within the last year, have we actually started training law enforcement officers. We've trained right now over 70 officers. We're starting to train the victim services. A judge has been trained. Prosecutors are being trained. So those wheels are in motion. Provo just received this grant, and one of the gentlemen from APS that's going to be in training in Provo, the groups out there, is also assisting us here. So as more and more cities and more areas become trained, and all of the individuals responsible for taking care of these situations, you know, you're going to see maybe even a greater need for, you know, change in legislation. But until you get the feedback, you're not going to know where your gaps are. And so I'm anticipating within, you know, this year we're going to have all the individuals trained. We're going to have our system in place. You're going to see, you know, that the rest of the piece of this, the public education piece coming forward. So, you know, and then we'll see, hey, is there a gap? Is there, you know, legislation? Are we missing somebody in the big picture in our community response? So, you know, we're ever looking to make it easier for the victims and their families, less cumbersome, you know, and trying to work on that process. So just know that it's coming. It's just taken, you know, here we are 2013, and I was talking about a case from 2004, 2005. So it just takes time, but it'll be there.
We have a couple more questions before we need to end.
I'm just thinking loud. Is there a coordination mechanism whereby outcomes and lessons learned are being shared? Or, because it seems to me there are government functions, various departments doing different things, Salt Lake County, state of Utah, federal inspired, and then educational institutions. Is there a coordinating mechanism so that we are not duplicating thin resources and so on?
The question is there a coordination and effort to prevent duplication of services? Yes, there is. All agencies that you had mentioned, Salt Lake County, all the different law enforcement entities in Salt Lake County, all your prosecuting attorneys, we all meet on a regular basis. There's Salt Lake County. We have a screening team that involves APS, Salt Lake County Aging, we have law enforcement, we have representative from a psychiatric hospital that we meet, and the community will come, the law enforcement officers and people from the community can come and screen cases with us. So we can collaborate and give the resources. So when law enforcement has a very difficult case, they don't need to go to 5 different places to get the answer. They can come to one place. And that's where we're gathering more and more people that are saying, hey, I want to join. I want to be an active part in this coalition. And so the number has grown immensely. I think when it first started, there's probably 15, 20 people. Now there's probably over 50 individuals that are committed in the education and awareness of elder abuse. I believe one last question.
And this goes to the Sheriff's Department. You said on your educational outreach that you had trained one judge. And so my question is, are all these cases going to that particular judge, or do they go through the random selection that goes through the clerk's office where cases are assigned out to various judges?
Unfortunately, no. That judge might be busy. So the question is, because we have just one judge that's been trained so far, would that judge be handling all of these types of cases, or are they farmed out? Right now, you know, and I guess you could talk to the court process. That, you know, each jurisdiction has responsibility. If there are misdemeanors, then they're going to our justice court. If there are felonies, then they're going to and they occur anywhere in Salt Lake County, then it's the Salt Lake District Court. Different cities have, you know, their justice courts. Different counties have their own district courts. So, you know, depending on the type of crime and where the crime occurred, you know, it goes to that jurisdiction. We will be training more judges. We do have a number that, unfortunately, because of the short time frame we weren't able to get them signed up for the training, but there's going to be more opportunities. So, you know, we hope to have more of these folks trained up. And as, like I said, as time goes on, you know, and you know, like I said, we determine that legislation needs to take place, and as these collaborative efforts are moving forward, and we're pushing out that information about, you know, the victim advocate for later life cases, you know, that awareness and that training, it'll take hold, you know. But like I said, right now, we just have had the one, but we anticipate as soon as the next judge's training comes out, we'll be sending some more.
Can I add a little bit to that? In April of this year, every single district court judge in Utah will be attending training focusing guardianship generally and the visitor volunteer program specifically.
Thank you. That was the director of education for the court, so you got it. Judges will be, the state court judges will be undergoing a training concerning guardianship issues. As I had mentioned earlier in my remarks, there is an effort to train them. That's guardianship on the, you know, there's the civil side of all of this, there's the criminal side of all of this, and so that's a lot of training, a lot of information for people to be gaining. So through the Salt Lake City Police program and that grant, and I'm forgetting the acronym right now, SLEEP, I guess, is training more on the criminal aspect. This that we just talked about is training judges more on the civil aspects of guardianship, conservatorship. So it is, training is happening, it's ongoing, it's never changing, and just a lot out there, but people are trying in very good faith to handle these issues. And like you, coming to be educated. I think we're done.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
If you have any interest in our program, please pick up some brochures up front. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.